Morning. I'll invite the fourth elected member from the District of Bordentown to say prayers.
Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of Cabinet, ex-official members, and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May the Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Please be seated.
Administration of oaths or affirmations?
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements?
None.
Presentation of petitions?
None.
Presentation of papers and reports?
None.
Questions to Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet. Fourth elected member for Bordentown to ask the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex-officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service. Question number 32, continuation of supplementary questions.
Recognize the fourth elected member from the District of Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, actually, I think the supplementaries were coming from the member from East End. What should I?
To put it in perspective, since the gentleman is now in the chamber, perhaps if you could ask your question and we'll start from that, Genesis. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask following question, standing in my name, to the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex-officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service. Can the Honourable member state whether or not the Deputy Director of Her Majesty's Prison Services has been reinstated to active duty? And if so, was there a settlement offer? And if so, what are the details of that settlement? Thank you.
Recognize Honourable Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The answer: the Deputy Director, Rehabilitation of Her Majesty's Cayman Islands Prison Service returned to active duty on February 20th, 2017. A deed of release and settlement was signed on February 10th, 2017 between the Chief Officer, Ministry of Home Affairs, and the Deputy Director of Rehabilitation. The details of the settlement are summarized as follows. A sum of Cayman dollars 15,000 will be paid to the Deputy Director by the Cayman Islands government as it relates to legal costs incurred. The Chief Officer will issue a letter stating that there are no findings of misconduct against the Deputy Director. The Chief Officer has undertaken that no further disciplinary proceedings will be instituted against the Deputy Director in relation to the incident in question. The Deputy Director will not institute legal proceedings in relation to defamation, constructive dismissal, breach of contract, as well as any other outstanding employment or other claims or any other related claims arising out of the facts outlined in the deed of release. The Chief Officer undertakes not to publish any adverse statement about the Deputy Director which may have the effects of damaging or lowering her reputation concerning any matter connected to her employment in relation to the said incident with Her Majesty's Cayman Islands Prison Service.
Recognize the member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at the time of those supplementaries, I was trying to determine if this particular case had been taken to court, and the acting deputy governor said no, it was not a court case. So I would ask that again of the now deputy governor.
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the case, there was a judicial review proceedings, as I had advised this Honorable House. I think what the acting deputy governor was saying was that it was the JR or the judicial review did not proceed, in that the Crown did not contest the matter, and we entered into a consent order. In other words, we accepted the argument put forward by the Deputy Director's attorneys. So the matter went to court. We did not have a trial. We consented to their position, and the matter was completed.
Member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, just to clarify, the matter went to court. Leave to apply for judicial review was granted, but before there was a trial, we entered a consent order, just to be clear.
Member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was about to ask that. Madam Speaker, the next question is the $15,000 that was agreed upon, was it not $24,000 that consent order from the court said that should be paid to the deputy director? Can the deputy governor say in total how much money was paid as a result of this case?
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Madam Speaker, the member is correct. So there were two cases. One that we, as a result of the consent order, once that case had been finished, we did, and the member has the correct information, that was $24,000 that was paid to the deputy director for her legal fees. The question asked about the settlement offer that allowed her return to work, and yes, that was $15,000.
Member from Easton.
So, Madam Speaker, the total then as a result of terminating the deputy director without just cause cost this country $39,000.
Member from Easton, were you soliciting a response, or?
Yes, ma'am. That was.
Honorable Deputy Governor.
That was the cost in relation to legal fees. We of course, would have complied with the various rules and regulations. So in other words, when she returned to work, we would have paid her for any outstanding salary that she lost, and we would have given her all her benefits back.
Member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, that's a little confusing. At first, the deputy governor said it was $24,000 legal, then $15,000 for her to return, and now he's saying that it was total $39,000 legal fees. Is that correct?
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Madam Speaker, we're talking about two different things now. His question was very general. He didn't ask me in relation to legal fees. There were two sums paid in legal fees. A big indulgence, ma'am. Madam Speaker, thank you. So there's two different things that I was talking about. The member asked in relation to legal fees, and I've given those two sums. He then asked what was the total cost. That's separate. Okay, well, Madam Speaker, the only fees that were paid in relation to legal fees was what I have said. That's
Madam Speaker, if I may, my question, Madam Speaker, was...
Member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my question was the total cost to this country because of the quandary we found ourselves in with the deputy director, because she was incorrectly dismissed, cost this country $39,000. That was my question. I didn't ask anything about legal fees at that stage.
Honorable Deputy Governor.
$39,000 in legal fees. If that's what I'm being asked.
Member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, what I'm looking for is the total cost to the country as a result of unfairly dismissing the Deputy Director of Her Majesty's Prison Service.
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Madam Speaker, I go back to what I said previously. The rules and regulations that we follow is that if a civil servant is found to be incorrectly dismissed and they're brought back to the service, we give them all sums that they would have earned if they had continued to work. So that is a cost, but that's not any additional cost. That's what we would have paid the Deputy Director if she had been at work. The additional cost that was incurred was the legal fees. Obviously, there would not have been any lawyers involved if she had not been dismissed. So that was the extra cost that was incurred.
Member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, obviously, because we were told no laws were broken, is this government admitting now that, is the government admitting that theoretically the prison law, which says that the director has disciplinary responsibilities for all officers, is the government admitting?
Member from Easton, when
it
you
was.
Sorry, with your question, you're referring to the government. It's obviously a section 55 Constitution, if that, I believe that's a correct section, matter which is purely an administrative matter. Are you directing your question to the Deputy Governor still?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Please proceed.
Is the government now admitting that the prison law, the dismissal of this Deputy Director of the prison was incorrectly done in accordance with the prison law?
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Madam Speaker, there was no such finding by any court in relation to that matter, so I'm unable to comment further. We have decided that Ms. Caesar should return to work, and we would now like her to get on and do her work.
Member from Easton, I'd allow 2 more supplementaries.
Madam Speaker, why are we here? why are we here if it wasn't done incorrectly when the the consent order that the government signed said that she must return to work until her job is properly terminated. That's what I read. Why are we here? Madam Speaker, really? Anyway, Madam Speaker, the acting deputy governor could not answer whether or not there has been any further interventions. Answer this carefully now. Please listen carefully, Madam Speaker.
Member, does that mean you know the answer to what you
No, I
already
don't.
asked him?
I'm asking. Madam Speaker, that's the reason we ask.
I'm listening.
Has there been any further intervention with the deputy director since that court order or reinstatement, the consent order?
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Madam Speaker, I don't understand what he means by intervention. So perhaps he could explain it so that I don't.
Member
I
from
give him the correct answer.
Easton, can you elucidate for the Honorable Deputy Governor?
Madam Speaker, what I'm trying to find out, there was an intervention to terminate this director. There was a consent order ordered by the court after agreement with the deputy director. Then there was a reinstatement. The matter should have been...
Member from Easton, if you could just stop there just 1 minute. I want to make sure that we're going in the right direction. You said there was a consent order that was ordered by the court?
Madam Speaker, it's enforceable by the court.
Okay, I just want you to clarify that, because normally when you say consent, the consent isn't usually between the judge and the parties. It's between the two parties, so it would not have been ordered by the court.
Well, if it's not ordered, it was agreed with the court so that the case would not continue the judicial review. Obviously, somebody said that they were wrong. So my question is, has there been any other interventions with this director since that court order was issued and carried out? That is, pay, reinstate, and the likes.
Honorable Deputy Governor, do you need further clarification or?
Madam Speaker, I don't understand what I'm being asked to do. I do not understand the word interventions. I don't understand what that means in this context.
Honorable Member from Easton, I did say last week you were a chef for flowery language, so can you so demonstrate and explain it?
Madam Speaker, I'm talking about disciplinary actions or the likes. That's an intervention in relation to this matter.
That will not count as a supplementary, by the way. You still have member from Honorable Deputy Governor.
So, Madam Speaker, is he saying, has there been any other disciplinary proceedings taken forward against the Deputy Director since the consent order or the deed of settlement? I just need to understand very clearly what he's saying.
Honorable Member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, what I'm asking is if there has been any further intervention relating to this particular matter.
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Madam Speaker, thank you, and I thank you for your patience. Madam Speaker, in relation to disciplinary matters, there's been no further disciplinary matters that have come to light in respect to the Deputy Director.
Madam Speaker,
Member from Eastern.
can the Deputy Governor say if there has been any other intervention relating to this matter other than disciplinary?
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Madam Speaker, again, I really don't know what he's talking about. Madam Speaker, I have said in the past, and I'll say it again. I feel very strongly that we're going down a path where we are bringing civil service matters into this House where it really does not belong. I'm happy to come here and answer questions about policy matters, but I do not like answering questions about individual civil servants. It doesn't help the civil servant one bit. I really don't know what the member is getting at. I have been open and candid and honest in every way that I possibly can be. There was a disciplinary matter that took place. The necessary procedures were followed. She's now back to work, and we would really like for this to be put behind all of us so that we can move forward.
If there are no further supplementaries, member from Eastern.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me ask it this way then, see if I will get some headways here. Has the government made any attempts since the carrying out of the consent court order to institute any other kind or kinds of discussions with or meetings, for that matter, with the Deputy Director relating to this particular matter?
Honorable Deputy Governor.
Madam Speaker, the ministry, the prison director have all put in place the necessary policies and procedures to ensure that the deputy director returns to work in a very structured manner. She's been out of work for quite a while, so we wanted to make sure that there was a smooth transition back into the agency. It's a very serious job that she is performing, and I'm satisfied after speaking with the chief officer and the prison director that all of those necessary formalities have been put in place, and it is actually being successful.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, I'm wondering whether the Deputy Governor will set out, mind you not that we have a lot of time left on this round, but will he set out what he considers to be interference from members of the House in regards to what can be done from the floor of this House? Because in committee, you have perhaps even more room on some issues. Certainly on finance, on matters of expenditure, we've always expected that we would have fair room, space to ask practically any matter. But this is several times I've heard the member making that statement. And I, for one, would like to have some kind of written guideline as to what is expected from members by his departments or by him.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition and in general other members, stand in order 20 through 23 deals with questions that can be asked, and 20 says questions may be put to a member of the government relating to any subject or department for which he is responsible or with which he is officially connected. Standing Order 20. And it also, if you would look, members would look at Standing Order 23 in specific. There are provisions when members can refuse to ask questions, but it's very, very specific. For example, 4, it says a member of the government may decline to answer a question if an answer would, in the opinion of the government, be contrary to public interest. And of course, public interest has specific meaning. So, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, we are very much aware of what our standing orders contain. But the statement has been made quite often because obviously the member feels under pressure, separate and apart from these standing orders somewhere. And so I certainly would like to see something in writing from his office as to what they expect, because this is very wide. The standing orders I'm talking about is very wide.
I understand that, Honourable Leader of the Opposition. I'm just a bit cautious as to having in a department, no personal free, but in a department instructing Parliament based on the principles of separation of powers. I understand where you're going, because it has been said, and I have listened to it. I was trying to be diplomatic in reading the standing order, so I would not be issuing a directive to the Deputy Governor in such an open forum. But he also has the privilege of the Honourable Attorney General there that can advise him, and him himself being a lawyer. But members, we are within the precinct of Parliament, and there are traditionally protections, and the ability to ask questions are very, very wide. And this chair certainly would not want to be seen as to interfering or endorsing any handcuffs on any members to ask questions. So,
Madam Speaker, I hear, and by what you're saying, I don't want it left on air either, like I am going down the wrong road.
No, sir.
No, what I am trying to do is to try to cement what we have so that to ensure that I am on the right track. So it's not, I quite understand the separation of powers. I know you mentioned that. Well, that's what I'm asking.
The chair is just trying to protect the right that I found here and that you are yourself very familiar with. I don't think, well, the Honourable Deputy Governor can speak for himself. I don't have to speak for him.
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, I think I'm certainly happen to have a debate with yourself and the members about it. I've made my feelings very clear. I think the Constitution is also clear. I understand standing orders. So, but I welcome the suggestion from the Leader of the Opposition, and perhaps we can take it offline and have a further discussion on it, because I want to make sure that I am fully complying with the rules of the House.
Member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, not only the Leader of the Opposition has a right to ask questions in here. If the Deputy Governor can get up here and say that he does not agree with us asking questions, then he needs to tell us the reason why, because he has a constitutional responsibility for certain subjects that he must answer to this Parliament for, and that just happens to include the civil servants.
Honourable Deputy Governor, before I call on you, I'd just like to recognise the Honourable Deputy Premier for the movement of suspension of Standing Order 23. Oh, didn't see you, sir. Apologies. The Honourable Premier for the movement of suspension Standing Order 23, 7 and 8.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 23, 7 and 8 in order that question time may continue beyond the hour of 11 o'clock.
The question is that Standing Order 23, 7 and 8 be suspended to allow question time to continue beyond the hour of 11 a.m. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. The ayes have it. Standing Order 23, 7 and 8 is hereby suspended. once again recognize the Honourable Deputy Governor.
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, according to our Constitution, it says that civil service matters is one of the reserved powers for Her Excellency the Governor, which she has delegated to me as head of the civil service. That, I think, is not in debate. What our civil servants abide, and public servants abide by a code of conduct, which says how they should operate. They're also told how, when they are aggrieved by matters, what rules they should follow. They're also said when they are unfairly terminated, or if any disciplinary action is taken, what actions they should follow, what mechanisms are available to them. Nowhere do I see that this House is mentioned as part of the appellant process for disciplinary matters, for hiring, firing, none of those things. It gives independent bodies that right. So, Madam Speaker, what I'm saying is this, is that we do not want, and I think there's broad agreement on this, a politicized civil service, where civil servants are saying, if I go to individual members of the parliament, I can get this, I can get that, I can do this, I can do that. We want them to be politically neutral and not be tied to any government or any individual member. Madam Speaker, my view is that when we then start bringing individual civil servants matters, why did you fire this one? Why did you hire this one? Why didn't you give this person this thing? Why didn't you do those things? That, in my opinion, is outside of the Constitution and is not how the Constitution should be carried out. Again, Madam Speaker, I am happy to answer questions on general policy. I think the members here were absolutely right to say, why do you have so many people on required leave? You are paying these people. That is a legitimate question that relates to the finances of this country, and the Deputy Governor should be held accountable for that. Madam Speaker, that is absolutely, in my opinion, fair. That's what I should be held accountable for. But when we're getting into individual public servants, civil servants matters, my opinion, Madam Speaker, is that is not how it was envisaged that the Constitution would be interpreted. Madam Speaker, I will bow to your rulings always, but that is my view, ma'am.
Member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, I'm amazed. Madam Speaker, in my 16 years, I've never recalled anyone asking about the firing of civil servants or the hiring unless it had been made a public matter. Unless it had been made a public matter. Madam Speaker, this thing was kicked from pillar to post in the public. Therefore, it becomes a public matter. Nobody came to me. It is a public matter that I have a particular interest in. And therefore, it must be answered by any member in this honorable parliament. And there is no way that the Deputy Governor can come down here and chase us to say what we can do and can't do in here with regards to public interest. Madam Speaker, any contractual agreement between the Governor, by extension, the delegation to the Deputy Governor, and a civil servant is entirely up to the Deputy Governor. However, the disciplinary procedures and how it works is a public document. And how they are engaged, the public management law and all the others. That is public, for public consumption. Therefore, I am the person who protects the public in here or advocates for the public. Therefore, I am entitled to the answers. If they are not from a security perspective, which government must maintain, I do not expect to break into that and make that public. I would never go over that line. But when it comes to a behavior exercise that is contrary to law by a senior civil servant, then something needs to be explained to this Parliament. That is, Madam Speaker, by firing someone unnecessarily so.
Recognize Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, this is a very interesting issue, but I believe, Madam Speaker, that the answer is quite simple. The standing orders provide that a member of the government may decline to answer a question if an answer would, not in the opinion of the chair or of the House, in the opinion of the government, be contrary to the public interest. So if the Honourable Deputy Governor or any other member of government comes to the view that the answer would not be in the public interest, in my respectful submission, they would need to consult with the Cabinet. And if the Cabinet then decided that the matter is not in, the response would not be in the public interest, the member is then entitled to answer it and to say so. But I do not think that the questions by members of the House are somehow circumscribed, and that you cannot ask questions that relate to specific civil service matters. I do think, though, that there would be some questions which would be inappropriate from time to time in a particular instance, but not sort of general proscription against asking questions that relate to the public service. That's, I hope, Madam Speaker, helpful.
Madam Speaker.
Member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, if you will allow me, let me say, one of the few times the last 4 years, the Premier and I can get up here and applaud him for his interventions, and I rest my case.
Well, if the chair could make an intervention, that's 2 times in the past week. There's an ambassador for hope. Third elected member from West Bay.
Madam Speaker, through you to the Deputy Governor, this legalese, some of us know it, some of us don't. You hear them saying that the word intervention, they don't understand. But one thing, the first question that was asked by the member of East End, we heard a figure of 15,000. Then the member of East End got up and he brought up a figure of 24,000. Then we heard 39,000. If I simply said that 39,000 from the beginning, maybe it would have helped ease the tension, Madam Speaker. And this happens too often when you get partial answers. But Madam Speaker, when the Deputy Governor says, and I agree, when we ask the question, or he read something, I think, Madam Speaker, where it says, in the interest of the country. Well, we have the great police case where we've paid out, what's the name of the big police case again that went on for so long that judges were arrested and all kind of stuff? Tempura, which we still can't get figures on some of that, Madam Speaker. And the public is requesting of us, why is it that they can't get this and they can't get that because money is so tight? We keep on paying out sums.
Now, one thing has come out of this, Madam Speaker, and this is my question to the Deputy Governor. Will he, in his position, what has become clear is that 4 officers at the prison sued and won, where this individual who was recorded, Madam Speaker, was paid more. So that comes down to, and they were saying that there was conflict of interest, people knowing people and not stating it. All these things took place, Madam Speaker, through you to the Deputy Governor. Will there be an investigation into how the HR and the Director of the prison could lose a case to 4 prison officers in a court? It's in the public, it was in the news, they won their case, and they have been ordered to have been paid. Now, you could probably wonder if they're going to get paid, because we know how this thing can draw out at times. When these type of things can happen, and for the government, Madam Speaker, to settle before it gets to the judicial arm, for the judge to take care of it, shows we knew that something was wrong on our side for us to cave in so quick, because believe you me, Madam Speaker, they're not going to give in unless they know they're wrong. So the question is there going to be an investigation into all this that's going on at the prison? Because something is obviously wrong and it smells rotten.
That's your opinion, I take it?
Mine and the public, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Honourable Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Obviously, I don't share that opinion, and I know the other people who don't. I think our prison director and his team is doing a really great job, Madam Speaker. When you think of what is happening at the prison, the murderers and robbers and rapists, gang members that they keep in custody, the murder drugs and stuff that they find going into the prison, I think we owe them some grateful thanks. But, Madam Speaker, in relation to the gender equality findings, we have reviewed that judgment. There has been some lessons learned in terms of how do we declare conflicts, those different things, to ensure that there's no perceptions that can be put forward, or wrong impressions, I should say. So yes, we have looked at the Gender Equality Tribunal. We've looked at this matter as well. There's been a number of lessons learned, and we are now putting procedures in place to make sure they don't happen again. Madam Speaker, this House has asked me to ensure that there's accountability in the civil service. We are absolutely going about that to ensure we hold our staff accountable. We're not perfect. We have gotten it wrong in the past, but when we do get it wrong, we will then admit our mistakes and have the matter resolved. So to answer specifically what the member said, I'm not aware of any investigation into this particular tribunal finding. There was a finding that 4 prison officers were paid a few dollars more, less than someone else who came in above them. That happens, that unfortunately, until the government addressed pay stagnation, was happening across the entire civil service. But we will put it right, and we will put in place all the lessons learned from these particular episodes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I notice that this door has been opened about the drugs, about the jobs that the prison officers do to try and keep control over the different people that are in there. I wonder if the Deputy Governor would have available whether or not they're using the 2 drones that we approve budget for them to buy at this stage.
Honourable Deputy Governor, I'm not sure of particulars, but you're in a better position than the chair to say whether that's a matter of national security. I'm not sure what the situation is.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Yes, Madam Speaker. Certainly, I don't have all of that information available, but I certainly would have reservations about discussing security arrangements at the prison in this open forum. Happy to give the member a confidential briefing if he would like it, or another member in the chamber, but I wouldn't want to discuss that in an open forum.
Madam Clerk.
Statements by the honourable members and ministers of the Cabinet.
Recognize the Honourable Minister for Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to make a statement as to why the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development was able to reallocate $85,000 of funds from its 2013-14 budget with respect to an appropriation captioned LM3 personnel loans. Madam Speaker, the government's personnel loans program offers loans to civil servants who are faced with miscellaneous, unexpected medical and bereavement expenses. Qualified civil servants can borrow up to $5,000, and loan payments are secured through salary deductions. For loans that are $5,000, applicants must provide collateral in order to secure the loan, and the loan must be co-signed by a surety who is gainfully employed. Madam Speaker, for the 2013-14 financial year, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development estimated that there would be 12 to 25 personnel loan requests, and a budget totaling $85,000 for that year was approved by the Legislative Assembly. It transpired that for the 2013-14 financial year, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development actually processed 22 such loans totaling $46,760. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development was able to process all of the approved loans in the 2013-14 financial year from savings identified within a separate appropriation, that being LM11 settlement loans. A total amount of CI $275,000 was budgeted in the LM settlement loans appropriation for the 2013-14 financial year. Madam Speaker, settlement loans are offered to new employees, primarily teachers who are domiciled overseas at the time of recruitment. Settlement loans are interest-free, can be up to an amount equal to 1 month's salary, and payable over a period not exceeding 6 months by way of salary deductions. When the need arose for additional funding for other government programs, Madam Speaker, a decision was made to reallocate $85,000 of savings from LM3 personnel loans appropriation to mitigate the additional cost sought for other government programs. The details of the reallocation of the $85,000 from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development 2013-14 budget, along with the other government programs required additional funding, can be found, along with the other government programs that required additional funding, can be found in the 2013-14 supplementary annual plan and estimates, which were tabled in the House on Friday, 17th March 2017. Madam Speaker, with respect to the 2014-15 fiscal year, During the 2013-14 fiscal year, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development required additional funds for the appropriation captioned LM11 settlement loans. Settlement loans are offered to new employees, primarily teachers, who are domiciled overseas at the time of recruitment. Such loans are interest-free, can be up to an amount equaling 1 month's salary, and are payable over a 6-month period by way of salary deductions. In the 2014-15 year, the Ministry approved 76 settlement loans, which totaled $339,621. However, the Ministry only budgeted $275,000 for settlement loans in the 2014-15 financial year. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance was able to identify savings that was equivalent to the additional $100,000 sought for settlement loans from the Ministry's other appropriations of LM3 personnel loans and LM4 overseas medical advances. Madam Speaker, the personnel loans are offered to civil servants who are faced with unexpected medical and bereavement expenses. A reduction of $25,000 was made to the appropriation of LM3 personnel loans to partially counter the $100,000 increase sought for the appropriation LM11 settlement loans. Overseas medical advances are interest-free loans that are applied for by uninsured patients who are faced with emergency medical costs at medical institutions, usually overseas. A reduction of $75,000 was made to the appropriation LM4 overseas medical advances to help mitigate the $100,000 increase sought for the appropriation LM11 settlement loans. Therefore,
Honourable Minister, could you just give us 1 second so that the balance of the statements could be circulated? I believe only one has been circulated.
my apologies, Madam Speaker.
Please continue, Honourable Minister for Finance.
Madam Speaker, should I start over for the 14-15 fiscal year since the statement has just been handed out? Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to make a statement as to the reasons why the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development was able to reallocate funds from and within its 2014-15 budget. Madam Speaker, during the 2014-15 financial year, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development required additional funds for the appropriation captioned LM11 settlement loans. Settlement loans are offered to new employees, primarily teachers, who are domiciled overseas at the time of recruitment. Settlement loans are interest-free, can be up to an amount equaling 1 month's salary, and are payable over a 6-month period by way of salary deductions. In 2014-15, the Ministry approved 76 settlement loans, which totaled $339,621 Cayman Islands dollars. However, the Ministry only budgeted CI $275,000 for settlement loans in the 2014-15 financial year. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development was able to identify savings that was equivalent to the additional $100,000 sought for settlement loans from the Ministry's other appropriations of LM3 personnel loans and LM4 overseas medical advances. Madam Speaker, Personnel loans are offered to civil servants who are faced with unexpected medical and bereavement expenses. A reduction of $25,000 was made to the appropriation of LM3 personnel loans to partially counter the $100,000 increase sought for the appropriation LM11 settlement loans. Overseas medical advances are interest-free. Overseas medical advances are interest-free loans that are applied for by uninsured patients who are faced with emergency medical costs at medical institutions, usually overseas. A reduction of $75,000 was made to the appropriation of LM4 overseas medical advances and to help mitigate the $100,000 increase sought for the appropriation LM11 settlement loans. Therefore, reductions to LM3 personnel loans of $25,000 and LM4 overseas medical advances of $75,000 counterbalance the $100,000 increase to LM11 settlement loans. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development was also able to identify small savings of CI $2,000 within the OE57 executive bank charges appropriation and CI $10,000 within the appropriation captioned OE87 default on Paloma government guaranteed loan scheme. These latter two savings were able to subsidize other government programs that were not budgeted for during the 2014-15 financial year, as they arose during the financial year, or it was not possible to determine the required and adequate amount at the time of preparing the budget. These included, number one, additional funding of $5.4 million for the provision of tertiary level overseas medical services to those patients who were determined to be medically indigent and the medical services required by these persons were not generally available in the Cayman Islands. This output is captioned NGS 55, tertiary care at various local and overseas institutions. Madam Speaker, no government has been able to determine the precise amount required for NGS 55 when preparing an annual budget because the amount required is highly variable. Number two, additional funding of $1.7 million for the preparedness and response to the Ebola virus disease. And number three, additional funding of $1.5 million for basic humanitarian aid, protection, and possible repatriation of the increased number of Cuban refugees that arrived in the Cayman Islands during the 2014-15 financial year. Madam Speaker, the details of the reallocation of funds from and within the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development's 2014-15 budget, along with the other government programs that require additional funding, can be found in the 2014-15 supplementary annual plan and estimates, which were tabled in this House on Friday, 17th March 2017. And Madam Speaker, I also wish to make a statement as to why and how the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development was able to reallocate $818,644 of savings from its 2015-16 budget for the health insurance premiums for seamen, veterans, and their dependents. Madam Speaker, in January 2015, when the 2015-16 budget was being prepared by the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, it was estimated, based on our records, plus a small contingency amount for new members added during the year, that the government would need $8,355,446 to cover the health insurance premiums for approximately 1,206 seamen, veterans, and their dependents. The government pays $577 per month per member on health insurance premiums for seamen, veterans, and their dependents. On the recommendation of the Office of the Auditor General, in its 28th of May 2015 audit report titled Government Programs Supporting Those in Need, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development commenced an exercise during the 2015-16 fiscal year that was aimed at updating the information in the database for eligible members receiving the health insurance benefit. The Office of the Auditor General recommended that those ministries responsible for the administration of social assistance programs should take steps to ensure that those eligible for benefits are determined by a robust and transparent application of eligibility criteria and clearly supported by evidence in the program files. Madam Speaker, that being simply put, compliance with the requirements of the program. Madam Speaker, following the recommendations of the Auditor General, the compliance and eligibility exercise to update the eligibility information for the health insurance benefits included the following. Number one, reviewing the register of births, deaths, and marriages on a monthly basis to remove those seamen and veterans who had passed away. Number two, on the recommendation of the associations themselves, after seeking confirmation from the Cayman Islands Seafarers Association, the Veterans and Seamen's Society of Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, and the Cayman Islands Veterans Association, as to which members were not eligible for the health insurance benefits. Number three, writing to each seaman and veteran to request outstanding eligibility information, such as copies of birth certificates, proof of service, and proof of residence. Number four, issuing public notices on radio and print media, encouraging and reminding seamen and veterans to provide outstanding eligibility information. And number five, meeting with both associations from Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac to inform them of the Ministry's intention to remove ineligible and unresponsive members. Madam Speaker, the exercise to update the database resulted in the removal of 114 members from the database during the 2015-16 fiscal year. Of the 114 members that were removed from the database, 22 were removed as they had passed away, and 92 were removed as recommended by both associations, as they were either not members of the associations or they were not residing in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, I repeat, on the recommendation of the associations. Madam Speaker, following the compliance and eligibility exercise and the removal of the 114 names, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development estimated that the government would not need $818,644 in health insurance premiums up to the end of the 2015-16 fiscal year, which ended on the 30th of June, 2016. During the 2015-16 fiscal year, Madam Speaker, there were other government programs that were not budgeted for because they arose during the fiscal year, or it was not possible to determine the required and adequate amount at the time of preparing the budget. Madam Speaker, these included, number one, additional funding of $1.4 million to the Mosquito Research and Control Unit to prevent the spread of the Zika virus. And Madam Speaker, this Honorable House will recall that at one point the country had as much as 20 confirmed cases of the Zika virus. Number two, additional funding of CI 5.9 million for the provision of tertiary level overseas medical services to those patients who were determined to be medically indigent and the medical services were not available in the Cayman Islands. This output is known as NGS 55, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, no government has been able to determine the exact amount required for NGS 55 when preparing the budget. And number three, additional funding of $2.9 million for basic humanitarian aid, protection, and possible repatriation of the increased number of Cuban refugees that arrived in the Cayman Islands during the 2015-16 fiscal year. Madam Speaker, since the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development had savings of CI $818,644 in its 2015-16 budget year from the health insurance premiums for seamen, veterans, and their dependents, when the need arose for the additional funding required above, a decision was made to reallocate these savings to subsidize the additional costs of the above government programs. The details of the reallocation of the $818,644 from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development to these other government programs can be found in the 2015-16 supplementary annual plan and estimates, which was tabled in the House on the 17th of March, 2017. Madam Speaker, I would like to make it abundantly clear that the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development was able to reallocate the savings from health insurance premiums from its 2015-16 budget without removing or reducing health insurance benefits for seamen, veterans, and their dependents, and without delaying those members who are eligible to receive the benefits from receiving such benefits. As stated above, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development had savings within its 2015-16 budget as a result of the compliance and eligibility exercise recommended by the Auditor General, and these savings were then used to subsidize the costs of other government programs whose additional funding requirements arose subsequent to the preparation of the budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize
Madam Speaker,
member from Easton.
just on a matter of procedure.
I beg your pardon. The member from
these
North Side.
Yeah, these statements just made by the Minister of Finance are not intended in any way to reduce questions in Finance Committee, which is to follow on these bills. And with your permission, I'd like to ask him one question.
Permission granted.
I think you said 114 people were taken off of the health insurance for seamen and veterans. Does the minister know where those persons are now getting health insurance coverage? And if he could state which is the most expensive plan, the seaman's and veteran plan or the poor relief plan? You know.
Honorable Minister for Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the statement just made was in compliance with Section 11.6 of the Public Management and Finance Law. Finance Committee will have its own time when that time arises. Of course, much of the information is in the statement itself. As to the 114 people, Madam Speaker, as I said, 22 of those had already passed away. And I would have to confer with my staff to see if we are able to answer the second part of the question, Madam Speaker. If I could be given a few minutes.
Yes, please proceed.
Madam.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, if you could just give him a couple of minutes, he wants to confer so he can listen to your question. Thank you. Honorable Minister for Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, firstly, we wouldn't know what benefits they're receiving elsewhere because they did not respond, but also they were removed on the recommendation of the associations because they were not members of the association. And Madam Speaker, apparently the documentation and the requirements is that they must be members of the association to benefit from the program.
Recognize Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, can I inquire of the Minister when it is expected that there will be a finance committee? Or is he expecting to hold a finance committee? I should rather put it.
Honorable Minister for Finance.
Madam Speaker, I am expecting to hold a finance committee if time permits, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
That's just a matter of procedure, Madam Speaker. Is the bills going, is he expecting to complete the bills in? What is the proposed process?
Honorable Minister for Finance.
Madam Speaker, this is my first term. I will confess to not being absolutely certain as to what happens with supplementary appropriations because I think I'm the first Minister of Finance for decades to uphold the law, operate according to the law, and to present the Section 11.6 statements as required by the law, and to bring the supplementary appropriations to this Honorable House as required by the law. So please forgive me if I cannot say precisely how it will work, given the limited time that we have left in this House. And Madam Speaker, that's all I can say, so there's no need for the opposition to ask any more questions on that point.
No, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
I suspect that the minister would like that, but I'm sorry I cannot comply with that, and I'm sorry if I don't know who he's asking forgiveness from. But I know that all that he just said is not correct, because the fact is statements have been made in time, and if the civil service didn't prepare them in time, certainly they were made, and the House was informed of the expenditure. Anyway, Madam Speaker, I still would need to know how he's going to treat the bills then. And if you don't have to, fine.
Honorable Minister for Finance.
Madam Speaker, as I've said before, it is my intention to have a finance committee, and finance committee is the committee stage of the approval process. As to how much time we will have in finance committee depends on how much time we have left in the House before the House is prorogued. Thank you, Madam Speaker, or dissolved.
I recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam.
Madam Speaker, may I, on a point of order?
Honorable Minister for Finance.
Madam Speaker, just a point of clarification. With respect to the supplementary appropriations for the years 2009-10 fiscal year, 2010-11 fiscal year, 2011-12 fiscal year, 2013 fiscal year. Madam Speaker, I brought those supplementary appropriations to the House in the early part of my administration, my term here in office. So, Madam Speaker, I am correct in saying that for the previous administration led by the Leader of the Opposition, the supplementary appropriations were not brought to the House, and therefore the statements perhaps would not have been made. I just want to clarify that point. He seems to be confused about it.
No, I'm not confused. I'm confused that you being told that we somehow...
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. No confusion. I know just how much people like to cross over things and give members half stories. At one time there was no deficit, and the next time there was $80 million deficit. So, Madam Speaker, somebody gave me the wrong information. But I can tell you, if then it wasn't brought, it wasn't because of a deliberate, Madam Speaker, attempt not to get them. Yes, Madam Speaker, just for matter of clarification also.
Order, can the chair just have a minute, please? Sorry, Honourable Leader Opposition was confirmed with the clerk.
Madam Speaker, you see, I don't like half stories, and it's not fair to the House. Accounts were not produced from the years 2001 or 2000, not 2001, because we were under the old system. It was 2005, 2009, and we had to bring a law under instructions by the audit office to forego those accounts. And the accounts were never made up because we knew the government civil service was always behind in getting those accounts. If the minister had put it that way, I would not have had a cause to rise. But what the minister made happen was to look like perhaps there was some deliberate account by the government led by the leader of the opposition not to bring the accounts.
Madam Speaker,
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, my intention was not to mislead this House nor the listening public. My intention was simply to state that I am the first minister to bring supplementary appropriation bills to this House as required by the law. Whatever reason it happened, when it did happen, entirely beyond my control. I do what the law says should be done, and I bring the things to the House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Get accounts. It's not that he's
Honourable Leader of the
Speaker.
Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Not that he's complied with the law any better than anybody else would do, and that's how you're making it sound. The fact is that the civil service didn't have the accounts. And how I can follow any law? The minister produces them? No. Does any minister produce the accounts? Keep going.
Honourable Minister of Finance, and then after that we'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what should not be lost on this House or our constituents is that when a minister takes responsibility for a ministry, they are to lead the ministry. They are to get the results from the resources provided to them within the civil service. That is the purpose to which you head that ministry. No, the minister isn't supposed to produce the accounts themselves because many ministers may not be accountants. The fact is, you are charged with the responsibility to lead and utilize resources given to you and get the results.
Madam Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
For the record, Madam Speaker, and other people well know this, who are well situated in this House, well know what I'm saying. That minister cannot get up here and make that kind of statement when he well knows that the civil service is responsible for putting together the accounts. If I could have done them, I would have done them. And if the Auditor General thought was anything other than what was happening, then he wouldn't have told us to make a law to bring to this House, to get this House to agree to forego those accounts. So don't get up here and try to twist it and think that I don't see through it. You're not that big.
Member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, I noticed there are 4 of us in here that were in cabinet at the time of 2005 to 2009. And I can say without any fear of contradiction, it was not 1 month went by that every minister and cabinet did not ask for the accounts to be delivered so that we could deliver them to the Legislative Assembly. And I want to make that very clear that albeit this minister brought ours, the leader of the opposition.
Recognize the Honourable Minister of Finance. You have
Madam Speaker,
point of order.
We are talking about 2 different things. Madam Speaker, we are talking about supplementary appropriations, and they're speaking about accounts. For the point of clarification and elucidation, 2 separate things. If there's any confusion, Madam Speaker, it is they who are confused. Supplementary appropriations are sums that are expended subsequent to the budget process. Apparently not. Accounts are simply what they are. You account for the money after you've spent it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, but he hasn't cleared it up because accounts are accounts, whether they're budget, is the budget one or the supplementary ones. We asked for everything and it was never forthcoming. I will give credit where it's due. When the UDP was in power, they brought an amendment to the law, which the now Premier and I argued that the 2009-10 budget should have been left out of the exemptions, which the now Minister for Finance brought it because we wanted to clarify exactly where what the position was with the government at the time that we left office. But Madam Speaker, I can confirm that every month, religiously, one of the ministers, in particular the Minister for Works, who was leader of government business at the time, requested it. Very little was forthcoming, or nothing was forthcoming.
I recognize Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You like to point fingers too much. That's why you've got nothing done, and that's why we're so late in this house now.
Order.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, we certainly need some order.
Madam Speaker, I rise to make a statement in accordance with Section 11.6 of the Public Management and Finance Law in relation to the Section 11.5 appropriations during 2013-14, 2014-15, 2015-16, and 2016-17. 2013-14 fiscal year. Madam Speaker, Section 11.5 appropriations for that year, there was a decrease in funds in DAT 1, advice and support to the Minister of District Administration, Tourism, and Transport, DAT 2, Government Services in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, and DAT 12, Collection of Coercive Revenue. These funds were transferred to DAT 3, Management of Assets in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, in order to assist with maintenance of buildings and vehicles. Madam Speaker, the appropriation OE 91, depreciation of District Administration, Tourism, and Transport executive asset was decreased by $49,093 in order to correct an error discovered in the budget process. The appropriation EI1, Cayman Airways, was increased by $250,000 through a transfer of $200,000 from EI34 and a transfer of $50,000 from EI11 in order to reduce the outstanding debt owed by Cayman Airways Limited. The line item EI68, Ministry of District Administration, Tourism, Transport, was increased by $25,000 for the purchase and installation of an IT system for the Department of Tourism due to the department's relocation to Government Admin Building. This increase of funds was funded by a decrease in the same amount in EI69, Port Authority of the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, EA55, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman Roads, was increased by $225,000 in order to continue paving the easterly Center Island Road on Cayman Brac. This increase was funded by decrease of $200,000 from EI125, the emergency shelter, and a decrease of $25,000 EI-139, Little Cayman boat launch. The line item EA-60, Cayman Brac Bluff Playfield, was increased by $150,000 in order to complete the construction of 3 changing room buildings and phase 1 of the parking lot. This increase was funded by a decrease of $150,000 from EA-125, Cayman Brac Emergency Shelter. Fiscal year 2014-15, Madam Speaker, there was a decrease in funds DAT 6, Public Education Programs, and corresponding increase in funds in DAT Tourism Public Relations in order to correct an error discovered in the budget process. Madam Speaker, TPA 67, Sports and Cultural Tourism Programs, was increased by $95,000 to assist in the construction with the new farmers market site on Hulda Avenue and to assist with infrastructure improvements at Saltwater Pond, Cayman Brac, as it relates to tourism accommodations. This increase was funded by a $50,000 decrease in EI 68, a $25,000 decrease in EA 36, and a $20,000 decrease in EA 55, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman roads. The line item EI 1, Cayman Airways Limited, was increased by $1 million through a transfer of the same amount from EA 9 land purchase, gazetted claims in order to reduce the outstanding debt, Cayman Airways Limited. The appropriation EI 68, Ministry of District Administration, Tourism Transport, was increased by $30,000 in order to assist with repairs in Cayman Brac asphalt plant. This amount consists of a decrease of $50,000 TP 67 and an increase of $80,000 EA 125 Cayman Brac Emergency Shelter. Madam Speaker, EA 60 Cayman Brac Bluff Playfield was increased by $250,000 in order to assist with the construction of an athletic running track, furniture equipment for the sports office, and additional tents required for CONCACAF games. This increase was funded by $250,000 decrease in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman roads. Madam Speaker, moving to 2015-16, the appropriation EI-1, Cayman Airways Limited, was increased by $2,400,000 in order to reduce the outstanding debt owed by Cayman Airways. This increase was funded by a decrease of $2 million in EA 143 and a decrease of $400,000 in EA 125 Cayman Brac Emergency Shelter. EA 68 Ministry of District Administration Tourism was increased by $700,000 in order to purchase of special equipment for Cayman Brac Road building and the replacement of assets inclusive of excavator, asphalt milling, bobcat attachment, road shoulder bobcat attachment, 4x4 backhoe, 2 pickup trucks, 2 utility vans, and 1 dump truck. This increase was funded by a decrease of $700,000 in EA 125. The line item EA 55, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman roads, was increased by $100,000 in order to continue work on the Big Channel Road and Hemington Road. This increase was funded by a decrease of $100,000 in EA 125, Cayman Brac Emergency Shelter. Madam Speaker, the appropriation EI 143, Cruise Berthing Facility, was decreased by $3 million. As mentioned earlier, the decrease consists of a transfer of $2 million to EI 1 and a transfer of $1 million to EI 65. Lastly, Madam Speaker, conclude with the Section 11.5 appropriations for 2016-17 fiscal year to date. The appropriation EI 1, Cayman Airways Limited, was increased by $5 million in order to reduce the outstanding debt owed by Cayman Airways Limited. This increase was funded by a decrease in the same amount of EI 74, Cayman Islands Airports Authority. Madam Speaker, the line item EA 60, Cayman Brac Bluff Playfield, was increased by $1 million in order to assist with the construction of a 25-meter competition swimming pool. This increase was funded by a decrease of the same amount in EA 55, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman roads. Line item EA 139, Little Cayman boat ramp, was increased by $50,000 in order to assist with the construction 64-foot extension of the Little Cayman North Coast dock. This increase was funded by a decrease in the same amount, EA 144, public restrooms. Madam Speaker, the appropriation TP 66, Sister Islands Home Repair Assistance, was increased by $50,000 in order to assist with the housing repair program for senior citizens in Cayman Brac. This increase was funded by a decrease in the same amount in EA 55, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman roads. Lastly, Madam Speaker, line item TP 67, Sports and Cultural Tourism Programs, was increased by $60,000 in order to assist with Cayman Brac, Little Cayman island-wide cleanup program. This increase was funded by a decrease in the same amount, EA 125, Cayman Brac Emergency Shelter. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Minister responsible for financial services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm also delivering a statement in respect of the Section 11.5 transfer in the 2015-16 budget year. Members of this Honourable House, Madam Speaker, will recall that as part of the 2015-16 budget and during Finance Committee, there was a vote to use the Environmental Protection Fund to fund operational aspects of the conservation work of the Department of Environment. At the time, I had written to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to clarify the extent to which EPF funding should be factored into the calculation of expenditure limits for the government's budget. There were several valid reasons that the EPF spending should be excluded from the expenditure restrictions, but primarily due to it not being counted as part of the cash reserve ratio, its inclusion in expenditure limits was an unnecessary restriction on its use. At the time that the motion for the use of the EPF was dealt with in Finance Committee, there had not been a response from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. As such, the EPF funds were placed in the operational accounts of the Ministry of Financial Services, Commerce and Environment. Specifically, the funds were placed in the DOE's accounts, thereby creating a surplus position as the DOE expenditure had already been approved with funding from general revenue. During the year 2015-16, it then became necessary to reallocate the surplus funds in the DOE's budget. This was accomplished through the use of a Section 11.5 transfer, whereby $200,000 was transferred to the National Trust for its Blue Iguana Reserve project, and $910,000 was transferred within the ministry to fund ongoing activities relating to the preparations required for its various externally driven assessments of our financial services regime. This reallocation did not have any impact on the government's financial performance or compliance with the principles of responsible financial management for the 2015-16 financial year, as it was just a reallocation of funds and did not increase planned expenditure. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Personal explanations?
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches?
None.
Raising of matter of privileges?
None.
Government business? Bills? Second readings? The Fuel Market Regulations Bill 2017.
I recognize the Honourable Minister responsible for planning, agriculture, housing and infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill for a law to provide for the regulation of the fuel market in the Cayman Islands by the Utility Regulation and Competition Office and for incidental and connected purposes.
It's been duly moved. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak thereto?
Thank you. Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this fuels sector bill introduces to the Cayman Islands the economic oversight of the fuel market. The objective of the bill is to provide the legal framework which will ensure that our citizens pay a fair price for an essential product and accompanying services. Madam Speaker, I have said so before in this Honourable House, and I will say so again this morning. Fuel is one of the most important drivers of our economy, or for that matter, any modern economy. fuel prices are essential for the economy's competitive advantage, and any negative or anti-competitive behavior by industry has a vast impact on the entire economy. The recent passage of the Utility Regulation and Competition legislation establishes the Utility Regulation and Competition Office, that is ERCO, and sets out its broad powers and functions and the administrative arrangements. ERCO's functions and powers in the various sectors is conferred through sector-specific legislation, as you would have recognized the enactment of the ICTA and ERA amendment laws, as well as the current bills, especially to do with the water sector, which are before the House now. Successful passage of the fuel sector bill, Madam Speaker, will grant to ERCO another sector in its regulatory ambit. We believe this bill will lead to momentous change, especially in understanding the bulk fuel market. The fuel market is an important market that affects the entire spectrum of our economic development and growth, Madam Speaker. It has a direct impact on affordability for citizens and businesses. So, with this in mind, the government decided to provide the necessary mechanisms for data collection and improved understanding of the market in order to make better decisions by the oversight body. The bill, Madam Speaker, introduces the principle of significant market power, SMP. Under the SMP rules, the regulator has to first determine if competition truly exists in the local fuel market. If it is determined that the market is not competitive, then the regulator's role is to take decisions to promote and ensure true competition by creating a suitable framework of rules. Madam Speaker, if these measures then fail to ignite competition amongst the participants, then the next step after consultation with Cabinet and with Cabinet's approval will be outright market price regulation. So, Madam Speaker, I have just explained the various steps until we get to the nuclear option. And that nuclear option will be used whenever it is proven. And Madam Speaker, I simply have to use the word in my own language that collusion is taking place. The process for establishing significant market power can be lengthy. And in order to position the office immediately on the passage of this bill to start the process of setting the market rules, the bill seeks to deem the principal players in specific fuel markets as having significant market power. Madam Speaker, the ERCO office has powers to regulate all utility markets pursuant to the coming into force of the Utility Regulation and Competition Law 2016. Services offered and provided by the fuel sector are covered services as defined, Madam Speaker, in the utility regulation and competition law. Madam Speaker, Clause 3 sets out the functions of the Cabinet under the legislation, which includes, for example, to establish policies, to ensure that the importation, distribution, marketing and selling of fuels and the operations and activities of the fuel sector are carried out in a manner that is consistent with the public's interest. Clause 4 provides for Cabinet to give directions to the office. Clause 5 sets out the functions of the office, which include promoting fair competition in the fuel sector, monitoring the price or the prices of fuels, and also ensuring that fuel supplies to the islands are adequate, reliable, and efficient. And another objective is to minimize barriers to entry to new participation of investors in the fuel markets. Clause 6 provides for the registration of importers of fuel. And Clause 7 provides that for the purposes of Section 44 of the ERCO law, sectoral providers listed in the schedule are considered to have significant market power in the markets specified in that schedule. And Madam Speaker, I alluded to this earlier. Clause 8 is another significant clause, as it empowers the office to obtain access to information it requires for its functions from any government entity, any person in the fuel sector, or any other person whom the office reasonably believes may have access to the information it requires. Clause 10 provides for the making of regulations and rules to give effect to the legislation. Madam Speaker, the schedule sets out the sectoral providers that are deemed to have significant market power. This bill, Madam Speaker, is not a very long bill. In fact, compared to some others, it is a short bill. But I believe that it is as important as any other bill when it comes to regulatory reform that we have been addressing. You see, it provides for us, in my view, a sustainable framework for monitoring and regulating the operations of not only the market, but also the service providers in the market, which will bring about the benefit to our citizens. And Madam Speaker, this is just the continuation of the journey, and it's going to be extremely important for us to get all of the regulations in place, Madam Speaker, and they are being worked on as we speak. Because of the legislative timetable, all of the other bills are being brought ahead of regulations to ensure that once the regulations are finished or completed and approved by Cabinet, that the framework will be completed and ERCO can be up and functioning the way it should be. Madam Speaker, there are some more comments that I will give in my winding up, but I thought I would just set out the broad parameters which are in this bill and perhaps seek comments from members of this Honorable House so that if there are any questions or anything we need to take on board, we can do so before committee stage. But I would seek members' approval so that we can move forward with this bill. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak or recognize a member from East End?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it has been said that when we address these broader issues in this Parliament, that we are not taking care of our constituencies. Well, there is no bigger, broad issue that affects our constituents more than this one. Madam Speaker, I agree with the Minister that fuel has a direct impact on affordability in this life, not only here in our country, but in any country. Madam Speaker, that affordability is about being able to afford not only to live, merely to survive. Madam Speaker, the Minister has said that this bill provides an economic oversight of fuel, be that gas that we cook with, gas that we drive with, or for that matter, any type of fuel. Madam Speaker, the one thing, because of the affordability of life and survival, the one thing that any citizen of any country, and for this purpose, ours, is concerned about is the cost of fuel and the control of that cost. Madam Speaker, this bill falls way short of that, despite what the Minister has said. I did notice that he said a couple things that captured my attention immediately, that stood out. One is that there are more comments to be made on the winding up, and two, that at some stage we can go to the nuclear option, which is price control. Madam Speaker, the time has come. I have said this over and often. The time has come for that nuclear option. The Minister talked about collusion amongst the competitors and the monitoring thereof. Madam Speaker, there are only 3 sectoral providers in gasoline and diesel, aviation fuel, that kind of fuel, and 1 in liquid petroleum gas for cooking. for domestic use. Madam Speaker, we see the gas stations are anywhere within 2-3 cents difference in prices. If that's not collusion, I don't know what is. Whether they sit down, do it, or they wait till one put their price up and they match it. Madam Speaker, I applaud the minister when we were there, when he required them to display their price so that people could have the choice. That was a bold move, the right move, but it didn't solve anything. Madam Speaker, it is my view that the cost of fuel in this country is an absolute, downright rip-off of the people. Madam Speaker, you cannot be calculating our electricity bill based on fuel per gallon, and any high school child can do this. Your kilowatt hours per gallon. And not see a difference of close to $3 compared with that and what is at the gas station. Madam Speaker, I recognize that CUC is the largest consumer in this country, or one of the largest. The general public is much larger than them. Not with diesel, fuel, Madam Speaker, but we're talking about fuel. The public uses aviation, diesel, gasoline, and the different grades of gasoline. I think we're only at number 2 diesel in the country. I think that's standardized now, whether it's sold to CUC or at the pumps. That's sulfur-free. Less sulfur therein. Because new vehicles now require, they're so sensitive, the electronics, they require sulfur-free diesels. Madam Speaker, when I was negotiating CUC's license, I appointed 3 Caymanians to lead that negotiation. Madam Speaker, subsequent to a contract being signed, a license, subsequent to those negotiations, CUC had a one line in their license, 15% profit on depreciable assets. It was agreed during those negotiations, tough negotiations as well, that their returns should remain between 9 and 11%, but on the rate base, not on the depreciable assets. Madam Speaker, thus, a formula was developed called the RCAM. An RCAM is defined as rate cap and adjustment mechanism. It is a mechanism for determining and modifying prices for electricity delivered by a T&D licensee to consumers as approved by the authority and specified in the license, in that license, T&D license. Now, Madam Speaker, since then, despite the then opposition taking me to task of what a sweetheart deal I had given CUC because they were my former employers, as soon as they entered government, they applied that same formula on water. Same formula, change the parameters. That's all. And I said that a few days ago on Friday, I believe, Madam Speaker. It's a worthwhile mechanism for the market. It's a very good mechanism to control the utility industry. We have all agreed with it because we have even now putting it in the waste water and water legislation. Madam Speaker, it is no different for fuel. Madam Speaker, we have been plagued over the years by the lack of knowledge as to how much fuel costs the supplier. And for no other reason other than we don't apply world oil price upon them from Platt. That is how the world operates, Madam Speaker. It operates in that the OPEC countries sell their product on a market, an open public market. It is traded there. The actual price on a monthly basis is delayed by 2 months. Madam Speaker, we can appreciate that, the average price that is. We can appreciate that because on the beginning of, we're in March now, on the first day of March, it probably started, for the purposes of this argument, $2. And it could have fluctuated all over the place. We have seen that before by the last day of March. By the time they calculate that, the many different markets and the many volumes that they sold on those different markets publicly, it takes a whole month to do that. So that's why it's delayed by 2 months. Now, Madam Speaker, what is also known is the day that fuel was purchased and what price it was at on that day at that supplier, at that producer, should I say. So, if we went to Louisiana on the 20th of March and bought fuel, we know exactly what it was being sold for by those producers that day. That is not a secret, Madam Speaker. There is absolutely no secret in that because it's a publicly traded company. Now, by the time that gets here, Madam Speaker, we have to appreciate and understand that Saul or Rubus, as far as I know, do not operate in the ships. So they have to hire ships to bring it. And those ships require a cost per gallon or ton, whichever they calculate it at, but it can be recalculated, or cubic meter, whichever the case may be. But you can calculate it down to gallons. So they have to pay freight for that, which includes insurance and the likes, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, some may say that this is a simple, I'm oversimplifying it. I'm not oversimplifying it, that's a fact. Those are facts. That's really how simple it is. You purchase it at a price, you pay a price for it to be delivered wherever that is in the world. Upon that, then you put your profits. Now, those profits, in my view, must be included in this law by virtue of a formula based on all of those numbers I spoke of earlier. The producer's price, the market price, which would be the same of that day that it was purchased, the cost to get it here, and then added on to that a reasonable cost for their profit margin, to give them a profit margin. We have to include storage, their operational cost, and all that, Madam Speaker, would have to be included in that. But we need, it would be that you give them a reasonable cost to operate within. Madam Speaker, I did it with CUC. They have been operating under this since 2008. And here we are trying to regulate another utility within our country which has the same effect on the affordability of our people to survive, and we have not even represented our Cayman here. I'm not saying that's the one should be used, Madam Speaker. What I'm saying is that's a good starting point. All we are going to do here is to monitor them. We have been doing that since, my good friend from Town would say, Christ Juan Rivera Beach. I understand, Madam Speaker, that the authority will look at the prices to see if they're competitive, if they're reasonable. How are they going to do it? What is the mechanism that we are putting in place to ensure that they get the proper information to determine whether or not our people are being treated fairly? Madam Speaker, we cannot expect everybody to be upright with us up front. Madam Speaker, I've heard on more than one occasion, the minister saying that they do not trust the information that is being given to them. I heard him on this honorable floor saying that, Madam Speaker. I wouldn't trust it either. So I think we need to employ Ronald Reagan's attitude towards it. Trust, but verifying. And Madam Speaker, verification is readily available in order that we do not have to rely on them for the information we need. It's available. Madam Speaker, if they buy it out of Venezuela, you really think the government down there doesn't keep tabs on how much the business sells and for what price? Of course they do. Therefore, the government, the company, the producers, must have verifiable invoices. Are they going to jail, you know, Madam Speaker? That's not Cayman, where the Minister for Finance cannot even get them to tell him how many clients they saw last year. They must produce it. It is even more so within America. When we down on the Gulf Coast with all those oil refineries down there. It is even more so because the IRS is going to close them down. Madam Speaker, our neighboring countries, many of them, majority of them, have mechanisms in place to avoid companies take, especially the utility industry. Madam Speaker, that's where residents of a country get hammered most. Because there are limited number of suppliers. Because the market cannot sustain them. You can have 1 million supermarkets. People will go to those that provide the best value for money. Not so in the utility industry. You can have 4 or 5 water companies running through the same constituency, the same street. You can't have the gas stations 5, 10 on the same road. It's more about location and demographically how they view that they can get more customers. Mind you, Madam Speaker, we have really, for a country that is 25 miles, 30 miles long, we got too many gas stations, you know. Madam Speaker, you would tell me cars nowadays are 23 miles per gallon, maybe? Some anywhere between 19 and 23, 24 miles per gallon. Madam Speaker, we can get to one with 1 gallon, you know. We can get to one with 1 gallon in the tank. There are 4. Well, one has now gone. There are 3 gas stations just up the road, within half mile. 3. No. That further than half mile? Well, what is half mile can he get? In one cut, one bite. Madam Speaker, I'm not saying that if people want to go into business, they shouldn't go into business. I'm not saying that. Madam Speaker, what I want is what we have in our neighboring countries, our brethren and sisters. Know that the government is protecting them when they put a cap, a price cap on how much they can charge. For instance, Madam Speaker, in my research some time ago, I saw where in Bahamas, mind you, Madam Speaker, there are people who say that the system is not a good system. There are those who advocate for it too and defend it. 35 cents for the suppliers and 45 cents about that for the retailers. Per gallon, that is. So immediately, Madam Speaker, we are at 80 cents. Over and above the world oil price. Now, for the purposes of this argument, Madam Speaker, let's say CUC is under $2, because it's somewhere there now. I saw it in the papers the other day, but it's somewhere there. The last time I saw it was $1.08 or in that region. Madam Speaker, let's say $2. Remembering now, they already got a profit line in that as well. Their profit margin is in that if CUC say they're getting it for $2 from the suppliers. So let's take off that profit margin and add the 35 cents for those on the outside. And let's add the 45 cents, which equates to 80 cents. But let's leave them for the purposes of this argument with the $2. Madam Speaker, you see where we are? $2.80. What is it at the gas station? $4.40 odd. Madam Speaker, you see where I'm coming from? And no one can tell me that that's oversimplifying it. I am merely showing that when I researched it in Bahamas, that is what they were applying for fuel.
Member from Easton, is it your intention to conclude within the next 5 minutes?
No, Madam Speaker, I need to go do some research again.
Okay, we'll now take the luncheon break and reconvene at 2 p.m.